The neon sign outside Murphy's Tavern flickered between red and blue, casting strange shadows on the wet pavement. Sarah Martinez adjusted her leather jacket and checked her watch. 2,300 hours on a Friday night in Norfolk, Virginia. The perfect time for someone like her to blend into the crowd of off-duty sailors and Marines looking to blow off steam after another long week. Sarah pushed through the heavy wooden door, and the smell of stale beer and fried food hit her immediately. The tavern was packed, just as she expected. Dozens of uniformed personnel filled the cramped space, their voices creating a constant buzz of conversation punctuated by bursts of laughter and the occasional shout over the music pumping from an old jukebox in the corner. She made her way to the bar, carefully observing everything around her. This wasn't a social visit. For the past 6 months, Naval Criminal Investigative Service had been tracking a ring of Marines involved in selling stolen military equipment. The investigation had led them here, to this unremarkable tavern just outside the Norfolk Naval Base. Intelligence suggested that tonight, a major transaction would take place. Sarah had volunteered for this undercover assignment. With her olive skin, dark hair, and casual clothes, she looked like any other young woman who might frequent a military bar. What the patrons didn't know was that behind her friendly smile and relaxed demeanor was one of the most highly trained operatives in the United States military. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez belonged to an elite unit so classified that most people in the Pentagon had never heard of it. The Special Activities Division operated in the gray areas where conventional military operations couldn't reach. They were the soldiers who didn't exist, completing missions that officially never happened. Sarah had spent 8 years perfecting skills that would make most Navy SEALs jealous. Hand-to-hand combat, advanced weapons training, psychological operations, and the ability to disappear into any environment. These were just basic requirements for her job. The bartender, a heavy-set man with graying hair and tattoos covering both arms, approached her with a practiced smile. "What can I get you, sweetheart?" "Beer. Whatever's on tap is fine," Sarah replied, scanning the crowd reflected in the mirror behind the bar. She spotted her targets almost immediately. 3 Marines sat at a corner table, speaking in hushed tones while occasionally glancing toward the back exit. The lead suspect, Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, was a 15-year veteran with an otherwise spotless record. The investigation had revealed his involvement only after months of careful surveillance and financial analysis. Sarah paid for her drink and found an empty stool at the far end of the bar. From this position, she could monitor Webb's table while maintaining visual contact with both exits. She pulled out her phone and pretended to scroll through messages while actually photographing the suspects and noting their behavior patterns. The first hour passed without incident. Webb and his associates continued their quiet conversation, occasionally checking their watches. Sarah nursed her beer and engaged in casual conversation with other patrons, slowly building the cover identity she would need if the operation extended beyond tonight. A young sailor named Tommy struck up a conversation about his hometown in Ohio. Sarah listened patiently, offering just enough personal information to seem genuine, without revealing anything that could compromise her real identity. She had learned long ago that the best cover stories were built on small truths woven together with carefully constructed fiction. "You seem different from most of the girls who come in here," Tommy observed, taking a long drink from his beer. "More confident, I guess. You got family in the military?" "My brother's in the Army," Sarah lied smoothly. In reality, she was an only child whose parents thought she worked as an administrative assistant at a defense contractor. The cover story had been maintained for so long that sometimes she almost believed it herself. "He's deployed overseas right now. I come here sometimes because it feels like being closer to him, you know?" Tommy nodded sympathetically. "That's tough. My sister worries about me all the time. Can't imagine how hard it is for families when someone's in a combat zone." Sarah felt a familiar pang of guilt. Her parents lived with constant worry, never knowing where she really was or what she was really doing. They believed their daughter pushed papers and attended meetings in a safe office building. They had no idea she had been shot at in 3 different countries over the past 2 years, or that she carried scars from missions that would remain classified for decades. Movement from Webb's table caught her attention. One of the Marines, a young corporal named Davis, stood up and walked toward the back of the tavern. Sarah excused herself from her conversation with Tommy and followed at a discreet distance, pretending to head for the restroom. The back hallway was dimmer and quieter than the main bar area. Sarah could hear Davis speaking to someone, but the words were muffled by the music and crowd noise from the front. She moved closer, using the shadows to conceal her position while straining to catch fragments of the conversation. Shipment arrives Tuesday. Usual drop point. Payment better be exact this time. Sarah carefully activated the recording device concealed in her jacket. This was the break the investigation needed. If she could capture enough of this conversation, NCIS would have the evidence required to move forward with arrests and potentially uncover the entire network. She was so focused on the conversation that she almost missed the footsteps approaching from behind. Years of training kicked in, and she spun around just as a large figure emerged from the shadows. It was another Marine, one she hadn't noticed before. He was clearly intoxicated, swaying slightly as he approached her with a leering grin. Well, what do we have here?" The Marine's voice was slurred but loud enough to potentially alert Davis and his contact. "Pretty little things sneaking around back here. You looking for some company, sweetheart?" Sarah forced herself to remain calm despite the immediate threat to her operation. "Just looking for the ladies' room," she said, trying to step around him. The Marine moved to block her path. He was big, at least 6 feet tall, and probably 200 pounds of muscle. The name tape on his uniform read Johnson, and Sarah could smell alcohol on his breath from 3 feet away. "Ladies' room's over there," he said, pointing in the wrong direction. "But I got a better idea. Why don't you and me find somewhere more private?" "I'm not interested," Sarah replied firmly, keeping her voice low to avoid disrupting the conversation she was trying to record. "Please let me pass." Johnson's expression darkened. "Not interested? That's not very friendly. I think you owe me a little conversation at least. I've been fighting for this country while girls like you just hang around bars looking for free drinks." Sarah felt her muscles tense. She recognized the type. A soldier who used his service as an excuse for bad behavior, believing the uniform gave him privileges that civilians owed him. She had encountered men like Johnson before, both in her cover identities and in her real military service. They were dangerous not just because of their physical capabilities, but because they represented everything wrong with military culture. "I appreciate your service," Sarah said, still trying to de-escalate the situation. "But I really do need to get going." The conversation behind her had stopped. Sarah realized that Davis and his contact had probably noticed the disturbance. Months of careful investigation might be compromised because of one drunk Marine's inappropriate behavior. Johnson stepped closer, his hand reaching out toward her arm. "Come on, sweetheart. Don't be like that. One drink with a real Marine. I'll show you what a hero looks like." Sarah's training screamed at her to end this quickly and quietly. She could disable Johnson in seconds using techniques that would leave him unconscious without permanent damage. But such an action would blow her cover completely and likely end the investigation. She needed to find a way to extract herself from this situation without revealing her true capabilities. "Look, I'm flattered, but I'm meeting someone," she said, taking a step backward. "He's probably looking for me right now." "I don't see anybody," Johnson replied, moving closer again. "Besides, what's he going to do? I'm a United States Marine. I eat guys like your boyfriend for breakfast." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Sarah. Johnson was bragging about his military prowess to someone who had completed training that made Marine basic training look like summer camp. She had survived situations that would have broken most people, male or female. She had killed enemy combatants in hand-to-hand combat and led missions in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. But here she was forced to play the role of a helpless civilian because the mission demanded it. "Please," she said, injecting just the right amount of nervousness into her voice. I don't want any trouble. Johnson misread her apparent fear as weakness. No trouble, baby. Just being friendly. You know how to be friendly, don't you? His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. The grip was firm and aggressive, designed to intimidate and control. For just a moment, Sarah allowed herself to imagine how this encounter would go if she weren't undercover. Johnson would find himself on the floor in about 3 seconds, possibly with a dislocated shoulder and definitely with a new understanding of what real combat training looked like. Instead, she tried once more to talk her way out. Let go of me. I asked you nicely. And I'm asking you nicely too, Johnson replied, his grip tightening. One drink. One conversation. What's the harm in that? Sarah realized she was running out of options. The longer this confrontation continued, the more likely it became that her cover would be blown. She could hear movement from the direction where Davis had been talking, suggesting that the Marines involved in the smuggling operation were becoming aware of the disturbance. She made a decision that would change everything that followed. I said let go, Sarah repeated, this time allowing a hint of steel to enter her voice. Johnson either didn't notice the change in her tone or chose to ignore it. Or what? You gonna call your boyfriend? You gonna file a complaint? He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the narrow walls of the hallway. Sweetheart, I've been dealing with complaints from civilians for 15 years. Nothing's going to happen to me. That's when Johnson made his critical mistake. Perhaps emboldened by what he perceived as her helplessness, or maybe just drunk enough to abandon any pretense of civilized behavior, he decided to escalate the situation physically. His free hand moved toward her shoulder, clearly intending to push her against the wall. In that instant, Sarah was forced to make a choice that would determine not just her own safety, but the fate of an investigation that had consumed months of careful work. The Special Activities Division had trained her to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances. They had taught her to make split-second decisions under pressure and live with the consequences. As Johnson's hand moved toward her, Sarah calculated angles, distances, and probabilities with the speed and precision that had kept her alive through dozens of dangerous operations. She thought about her real identity, hidden behind layers of classification and bureaucratic protection. She thought about the Marines at the corner table, possibly conducting illegal activities that weakened military readiness. She thought about women like herself, who had fought for acceptance and respect in a male-dominated profession, only to encounter men who believed strength gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. Most of all, she thought about the oath she had taken years ago to protect and defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Sometimes those enemies wore the same uniform she did. Johnson's hand was inches from her shoulder when Sarah made her choice. The mission parameters had changed. Her cover identity was about to be compromised anyway. The only question now was how she would respond to a direct physical assault from a fellow service member. In the split second before contact, Sarah's mind cataloged everything she knew about hand-to-hand combat techniques, pressure points, and methods for quickly incapacitating an opponent without causing permanent damage. She considered the legal implications of defending herself while undercover, the potential impact on the ongoing investigation, and the likelihood that Johnson would remember enough details to identify her later. But mostly, she thought about sending a message that would be understood by every person in Murphy's Tavern that night. The message that some women were not as helpless as they appeared. Johnson's hand touched her shoulder, and everything changed. The moment Johnson's hand made contact with her shoulder, Sarah's training took over completely. 8 years of muscle memory and combat conditioning activated in less than a heartbeat. Her response was swift, precise, and utterly devastating. Sarah grabbed Johnson's wrist with her left hand while simultaneously driving her right elbow upward into his solar plexus. The strike landed with surgical precision, causing him to double over and gasp for air. Before he could recover, she twisted his arm behind his back and applied pressure to a nerve cluster that sent shooting pain up his shoulder. Johnson found himself face first against the wall, his arm locked in a position that made any movement excruciating. The entire sequence had taken less than 3 seconds, and had been executed with such smooth efficiency that observers might have thought it was choreographed. "I asked you politely to let me go," Sarah said quietly, her voice now carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to command. "I tried to avoid the situation, but you made a choice. Now you're going to learn about consequences." Johnson struggled against her grip, but every movement only increased his pain. "What the hell? Let me go. Who do you think you are? Someone who doesn't appreciate being grabbed by drunk Marines who think their uniform gives them special privileges," Sarah replied, maintaining the pressure on his arm. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk back to your table, sit down, and think very carefully about how you treat women. If I see you bothering anyone else tonight, we're going to have a much longer conversation." She released him and stepped back, ready to react if he decided to continue the confrontation. Johnson turned around slowly, his face a mixture of pain, confusion, and wounded pride. He rubbed his shoulder and stared at her with new understanding. "You're military," he said, his voice hoarse from the strike to his chest. "Nobody moves like that without serious training." Sarah didn't confirm or deny his assessment. "I'm someone who knows how to take care of herself. That's all you need to know." Johnson looked like he wanted to say something else, but the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted the moment. 3 more Marines appeared in the hallway, drawn by the commotion. Sarah recognized one of them as Corporal Davis, the man she had been trying to observe. "Everything okay back here?" Davis asked, his eyes moving between Johnson and Sarah. "We heard some kind of disturbance." Johnson straightened his uniform and tried to salvage what remained of his dignity. "Just a misunderstanding. No big deal." Sarah could see suspicion in Davis's eyes. The corporal was clearly wondering who this woman was and why Johnson looked like he had just been in a fight. Any hope of maintaining her cover identity was rapidly evaporating. "I was just leaving," Sarah said, moving toward the main bar area. "Excuse me." Davis stepped aside to let her pass, but she could feel his eyes tracking her movement. The careful surveillance operation she had been conducting was officially compromised. Months of investigation would now have to proceed without the evidence she might have gathered tonight. Back in the main bar area, Sarah noticed that the atmosphere had changed. Word of the hallway incident had spread, and conversations had become quieter and more subdued. Several patrons were stealing glances in her direction, clearly curious about what had happened. She made her way back to where Tommy was still sitting, but the young sailor's demeanor had shifted as well. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked. "Someone said there was some kind of fight back there." "Nothing I couldn't handle," Sarah replied, finishing her beer and placing money on the bar. "I should probably get going." "Wait," Tommy said, lowering his voice. "Look, I don't know who you really are, but that was Johnson you just tangled with. He's got friends, and they don't like being embarrassed. Maybe you should stick around for a while, let things cool down." Sarah appreciated the young sailor's concern, but she knew that staying would only create more complications. "I'll be fine. Thanks for the conversation." As she headed toward the front door, she could hear whispered discussions breaking out throughout the bar. The word military came up repeatedly, along with speculation about her identity and background. By tomorrow, the story would have spread throughout the Norfolk Naval Base, probably with significant embellishment. Outside Murphy's Tavern, Sarah walked quickly to her car while checking for any signs of being followed. The mission had failed, but she had gained valuable intelligence about the smuggling operations timeline and methodology. The investigation would continue, just through different channels. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from her handler. "Extraction required. Compromised position. Proceed to Safe House Alpha." Sarah started her car and pulled into traffic, following a route designed to detect and evade surveillance. Her thoughts turned to the report she would have to write, explaining how a routine intelligence gathering operation had turned into a physical confrontation with a fellow Marine. The Special Activities Division took a dim view of operations that attracted unwanted attention, but they also understood the realities of fieldwork. Sometimes circumstances required improvisation, and sometimes that improvisation involved reminding people that appearances could be deceiving. 20 minutes later, Sarah parked outside a nondescript office building in downtown Norfolk. She took the elevator to the fourth floor and used her key card to access a suite of rooms that officially belonged to a consulting firm specializing in logistics management. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Rodriguez was waiting for her in the secure conference room. Rodriguez had been her handler for 3 years, and she respected his judgment even when she disagreed with his methods. He was one of the few people who knew her real identity and understood the unique pressures of deep cover operations. "Sit down, Martinez," Rodriguez said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I've already received preliminary reports from our surveillance team. Want to tell me your version?" Sarah recounted the evening's events in detail, from her initial observations of the target Marines to the confrontation with Johnson and its aftermath. Rodriguez listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a secure tablet. "The good news," he said when she finished, "is that we got what we needed. The conversation you recorded, combined with financial records and other evidence, gives us enough to move forward with arrests. The bad news is that your cover identity is blown, and we're going to have to extract you from this assignment." "What about Johnson?" Sarah asked. "He knows I have military training. If he starts asking questions..." Johnson reported to his commanding officer that he was assaulted by an unknown civilian outside a Norfolk bar. Rodriguez replied with a slight smile. "Apparently, he's too embarrassed to admit that a woman half his size put him on the ground in 3 seconds. His CEO is recommending counseling for alcohol-related incidents." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. "So the official record doesn't mention my involvement? As far as the Marine Corps is concerned, Staff Sergeant Johnson got drunk and picked a fight with the wrong civilian. There's no mention of your real identity or this operation. However, we're going to have to reassign you to avoid any possibility of recognition." Rodriguez pulled up a file on his tablet and turned it toward her. "We have a new assignment that should suit your particular skills. Intelligence suggests that a defense contractor in San Diego is selling classified technology to foreign buyers. We need someone who can infiltrate their organization and gather evidence." Sarah studied the preliminary briefing materials. The target company appeared to be a legitimate aerospace firm with government contracts, but financial irregularities suggested they were involved in illegal technology transfer. The assignment would require her to assume a new identity as an engineer with security clearance. "Timeline," she asked. "You have 2 weeks to prepare your cover identity and relocate to California. The mission briefing is scheduled for next Monday." Sarah nodded, already beginning to think about the challenges of the new assignment. Each deep cover operation required her to become a different person, with a complete backstory, professional credentials, and social connections that could withstand scrutiny. "There's one more thing," Rodriguez added. "The incident tonight is going to generate some attention. Word is already spreading through the Norfolk base about a mysterious woman who took down a Marine in hand-to-hand combat. We need to make sure that story doesn't connect to your real identity." "What kind of attention are we talking about?" "The kind that makes people curious about who you really are and what kind of training you have. Military communities are small, and stories like this travel fast. We're going to have to be extra careful about your next assignment." Sarah understood the implications. Her effectiveness as an undercover operative depended on her ability to blend into civilian environments without arousing suspicion. If word spread that she possessed advanced combat training, future assignments would become much more difficult. "For what it's worth," Rodriguez continued, "you handled a difficult situation appropriately. Johnson was out of line, and you used minimum force necessary to extract yourself from a dangerous position. The fact that you maintained operational security while defending yourself shows good judgment under pressure." "Thank you, sir. But I still feel like I could have handled it differently." "Maybe, but second-guessing tactical decisions after the fact is a luxury we can't afford in this job. You made the best choice available with the information you had at the time. That's all anyone can do." Rodriguez closed the file and stood up, signaling the end of their meeting. "Get some rest. You have a busy few weeks ahead of you." "And Martinez." "Yes, sir. Good work tonight." The evidence you gathered is going to put some bad actors behind bars and protect military equipment from theft. That's worth a blown cover identity. Sarah left the safe house and drove to her apartment, a modest one-bedroom unit that served as her official residence. Like everything else in her life, the apartment was carefully constructed to support her cover identity. The furniture was generic, the decorations were minimal, and there was nothing that would reveal her true profession. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her couch, replaying the evening's events in her mind. The confrontation with Johnson had been unavoidable, but she wondered if she could have handled it with more finesse. The line between protecting her cover and protecting herself was often razor thin. Her phone rang, displaying a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message with growing concern. "Hi, this is Tommy from the bar tonight. I got your number from, well, it doesn't matter how I got it. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. There's been a lot of talk since you left, and some of Johnson's friends are pretty upset about what happened. I don't know who you really are, but you might want to be careful for a while." Sarah deleted the message and made a mental note to change her phone number. The fact that someone had tracked down her contact information meant that her cover identity was compromised more thoroughly than she had initially realized. She spent the next hour conducting electronic surveillance detection, checking her email accounts, social media profiles, and other digital footprints for signs of unwanted attention. Everything appeared normal, but she knew that determined investigators could uncover connections that weren't immediately obvious. The wine helped her relax, but her mind continued to race. Tomorrow she would begin the process of dismantling her current identity and constructing a new one. It was a task she had performed many times before, but it never became routine. Each identity represented months or years of carefully constructed lies, and letting go of them always felt like a small death. Sarah thought about the women who would visit Murphy's Tavern in the coming weeks and months. Would they be safer because Johnson had learned that some women could defend themselves? Or would he simply become more careful about choosing his targets? She hoped that word of the incident would spread beyond just the immediate witnesses. Military culture desperately needed more examples of women who refused to be intimidated or victimized. Maybe her actions tonight would inspire other women to stand up for themselves or discourage other men from behaving like Johnson. But she also knew that her effectiveness as an operative depended on her ability to remain invisible. The more attention she attracted, the harder it became to do her job. It was a constant balance between making a difference and maintaining operational security. As she prepared for bed, Sarah reflected on the strange double life she led. To her parents, she was a quiet government employee who spent her days reviewing contracts and attending meetings. To her colleagues in the Special Activities Division, she was a highly trained operative capable of handling the most sensitive missions. Tonight, for just a few minutes, she had been herself, a woman with the training and confidence to defend herself against a much larger attacker. It had felt good to drop the pretense and act according to her true capabilities. But it had also reminded her of the price she paid for her chosen profession. Tomorrow, she would begin becoming someone else entirely. In 2 weeks, she would be living in California with a new name, new background, and new mission. The woman who had confronted Johnson in Murphy's Tavern would cease to exist, remembered only in the official reports and the stories that would inevitably grow in the telling. Sarah Martinez fell asleep thinking about the man she would become in her next assignment, already beginning the psychological transformation that would make her new identity believable. It was a skill she had perfected over years of practice, but tonight it felt more difficult than usual. Perhaps because for once, she had been able to be exactly who she really was. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez sat in a coffee shop in downtown San Diego, reviewing technical specifications for advanced radar systems while maintaining surveillance on her target across the street. Her new identity as Dr. Jennifer Walsh, aerospace engineer with top-secret clearance, had taken weeks to perfect but was now solid enough to withstand deep scrutiny. The assignment had proven more complex than initially expected. Meridian Aerospace Technologies wasn't just selling classified technology to foreign buyers. They were actively recruiting military personnel to steal information from secure facilities. The network reached deep into several defense contractors and had compromised numerous projects vital to national security. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Sarah glanced at it casually, then felt her blood run cold. "Hey, Jennifer. Or should I say Sarah? We need to talk." Tommy. The young sailor from Murphy's Tavern had somehow tracked her down in California, despite her new identity and careful operational security. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If Tommy could find her, others could too. Her cover was potentially blown, and with it, months of careful infiltration work. She paid for her coffee and left the shop, following standard protocols for when an operation was compromised. As she walked, Sarah activated a secure communication device and sent an emergency signal to her handler. Within minutes, her phone rang with a return call. "What's your status?" Rodriguez asked without preamble. "Potential compromise. Someone from a Norfolk assignment has made contact using my current cover identity. Requesting immédiate consultation. Safe House Charlie, 1 hour. And Martinez? Come armed." Sarah spent the next 45 minutes conducting surveillance detection routes through San Diego's downtown area, using every technique she had learned to identify potential followers. She saw nothing suspicious, but that didn't mean she wasn't being watched by professionals. The safe house was located in a business district disguised as a management consulting firm. Sarah used her key card to access the private elevator that led to the secure floors above. Rodriguez was waiting for her in the same type of sterile conference room she had visited in Norfolk. "Show me the message," he said immediately. Sarah handed over her phone, and Rodriguez studied the text while accessing a secure computer terminal. "Thomas Mitchell, Sonar Technician 2nd Class, USS Newport News. Clean record, no security violations, no known connections to hostile intelligence services." "How did he find me?" Sarah asked. "That's what we need to determine. Walk me through every interaction you had with this individual." Sarah recounted her conversation with Tommy at Murphy's Tavern, emphasizing that she had revealed only minimal personal information. She had used her cover identity consistently and hadn't mentioned anything that could lead to her current assignment. Rodriguez pulled up additional files on a screen. Mitchell requested leave last week and flew to San Diego. According to his travel records, he's staying at a hotel downtown, about 6 blocks from your apartment. He's been in the city for 3 days. What kind of investigation could a sonar technician conduct that would lead him to my location? The kind that suggests he's not working alone. Either Mitchell has resources we don't know about, or someone is providing him with assistance. Rodriguez turned his computer screen toward her. "There's something else. Remember the Marines you were investigating at Murphy's Tavern? They were arrested 2 months ago based on the evidence you collected. During interrogation, Corporal Davis mentioned a woman who was conducting surveillance on their operation." Sarah felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to connect. "He made me that night." Apparently so. And Davis has connections throughout the Norfolk base. If he started asking questions about mysterious women with military training, your name might have come up. But how would that information reach Tommy? Rodriguez pulled up another file. That's where it gets interesting. Thomas Mitchell's girlfriend works in the personnel office at Norfolk Naval Base. She has access to records that could potentially identify military personnel based on physical descriptions and background information. Sarah understood the implications immediately. If Tommy's girlfriend had access to personnel files, she could have searched for women with military training who matched Sarah's description. Combined with other information, that search might have led to her real identity. "There's more," Rodriguez continued. "Intelligence suggests that the technology theft ring we're investigating in San Diego has connections to the equipment theft operation in Norfolk. We may be dealing with a much larger network than we initially realized." "Are you suggesting that Tommy is working for the smuggling ring?" "I'm suggesting that his appearance here is too convenient to be coincidence. Either he's an unwitting tool being used by someone else, or he's a willing participant in a counter-surveillance operation. Sarah considered the possibilities. The young sailor she had met at Murphy's Tavern had seemed genuinely concerned about her safety. But intelligence operatives were trained to appear trustworthy, and she had been fooled by enemy agents before. "What's the protocol?" she asked. "We need to determine his intentions and eliminate any threat to the operation. I'm authorizing you to make contact and assess the situation, but maintain your cover identity and be prepared for hostile action." Rodriguez handed her a small device that looked like a standard cell phone. "This contains tracking and recording equipment. It will also send an emergency signal if you're compromised. We'll have backup teams standing by." Sarah studied the phone and nodded. "Where and when?" He suggested the Balboa Park Museum. "Public location, multiple exits, good sight lines for surveillance. Meet him there in 2 hours. Rules of engagement: gather information first. If he represents a threat to national security or your personal safety, use your discretion. But remember that he's a United States sailor unless proven otherwise." Sarah left the safe house and returned to her apartment to prepare for the meeting. She selected clothing that would allow freedom of movement while concealing the weapons she would carry. A lightweight jacket covered the compact pistol in her shoulder holster, while a ceramic knife was secured in her boot. The drive to Balboa Park gave her time to think through possible scenarios. If Tommy was an innocent sailor who had somehow tracked her down through curiosity or romantic interest, she would have to discourage his attention without revealing sensitive information. If he was working for hostile intelligence, she would need to extract information about his sponsors while protecting her own identity. The museum was crowded with tourists and local families enjoying the sunny California afternoon. Sarah arrived early and conducted a thorough reconnaissance of the area, identifying potential threats and escape routes. She spotted at least 3 individuals who might be conducting surveillance, but couldn't determine if they were connected to Tommy or were part of her own backup team. Tommy appeared at the agreed-upon meeting point exactly on time. He looked older than she remembered, with new lines around his eyes and a more serious expression. Gone was the cheerful young sailor she had met in Norfolk. In his place was someone who appeared to be carrying the weight of significant stress. "Hello, Jennifer," he said quietly. "Thank you for coming." Sarah maintained her cover identity while studying his demeanor for signs of deception. "I think you had me confused with someone else. My name is Jennifer Walsh." Tommy smiled sadly. "You could drop the act. I know who you really are, Sarah Martinez, Lieutenant, United States Army, currently assigned to the Special Activities Division. I know about your undercover assignment in San Diego, and I know why you're really here." Sarah felt her training take over, calculating distances and angles while maintaining a calm exterior. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. Just like you knew exactly how to disable a 200-pound Marine in 3 seconds. Just like you knew to record conversations in that hallway at Murphy's Tavern. Just like you know that I'm not here to threaten you." "What do you want?" Sarah asked, abandoning the pretense. Tommy gestured toward a nearby bench. "I want to help you stop the people who killed my girlfriend." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "What happened?" "Amy was murdered 3 weeks ago. The official report says it was a mugging gone wrong, but I know better. She was killed because she helped me find information about you." They sat down on the bench, and Tommy pulled out a tablet computer. Amy had access to personnel records through her job at Norfolk. "After that night at Murphy's Tavern, I couldn't stop thinking about who you really were. I've never seen anyone move like that, and I've been around military people my whole life. So you asked your girlfriend to search for information about me. At first, it was just curiosity, but Amy found something that scared her. Your records were heavily classified, more than they should be for an administrative assistant. When she tried to access more detailed information, someone noticed." Tommy showed her a series of photographs on his tablet. They showed Amy's apartment, clearly taken after a violent struggle. This wasn't a random robbery. Her laptop was missing, but expensive jewelry and electronics were left behind. Whoever did this was looking for specific information. Sarah studied the images, her trained eye picking up details that civilian investigators might miss. The pattern of damage suggested professional work, someone who knew how to search a location efficiently and eliminate witnesses without leaving obvious evidence. What makes you think her death was connected to her search about me? Because 2 days after she died, someone approached me with an offer. They knew about Amy's investigation, and they knew that I had requested leave to come to San Diego. They offered me money to find you and report your location. Sarah felt pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Who approached you? That's what I've been trying to figure out. The man who contacted me said his name was Davis, but he didn't match the description of the Marine by that name who was arrested in Norfolk. I think someone is using false identities. Did you take their offer? Tommy looked offended by the suggestion. Of course not. Amy was murdered because she helped me satisfy my curiosity about you. I'm not going to compound that mistake by betraying another service member. Then, why are you here? Because I think the people who killed Amy are connected to whatever investigation you're conducting in San Diego. And I think I might be able to help you stop them. Sarah considered the implications. If Tommy was telling the truth, then her enemies were more organized and ruthless than she had realized. They had identified and eliminated a potential source of information about her identity, then attempted to recruit Tommy as an unwitting asset. What kind of help are you offering? Tommy pulled up another file on his tablet. Amy made copies of everything before she was killed. Personnel records, financial information, communication logs. She hid the files on a secure server that only I can access. Sarah looked at the data Tommy was showing her. It included detailed information about the Marines arrested in Norfolk, their financial records, and communication patterns that suggested connections to defense contractors in multiple cities, including San Diego. This information could be vital to the investigation, she admitted. But working with you puts you at risk. I'm already at risk. The people who killed Amy know that I have information they want. My only protection is making sure that information gets to the right people. Sarah made a decision that would change both of their lives. I need to contact my superiors and get authorization to bring you into the investigation officially. Can you stay hidden for a few days while I arrange protection? I can take care of myself. But, Sarah, there's something else you need to know. What? Tommy's expression grew even more serious. The man who approached me mentioned that they had identified other operatives working similar assignments. You're not the only one who's been compromised. There's a much larger counterintelligence operation targeting your organization. Sarah felt the world shift around her. If Tommy was correct, then the Special Activities Division was facing a systematic effort to identify and eliminate its deep cover operatives. The mission in San Diego might be just one part of a broader campaign against American intelligence capabilities. I need to get you somewhere safe while I report this information, she said, standing up from the bench. There's one more thing, Tommy said, not moving. Amy's investigation revealed something else about your identity. Something that suggests your own organization might not be completely trustworthy. Sarah sat back down. Explain. Some of the classified records Amy accessed showed discrepancies in your operational history. Missions that were reported as successful, but resulted in casualties that weren't officially recorded. Financial transfers that don't match standard operational funding. Tommy handed her a printed document. I think someone within your own organization has been using operatives like you for unauthorized missions. Amy died because she discovered evidence of corruption at levels we can't even imagine. Sarah stared at the document, recognizing mission codes and operation names that should have been known only to her immediate superiors. If Tommy's information was accurate, then the conspiracy reached into the heart of the Special Activities Division itself. Who else knows about this information? Just me, now that Amy is dead. But I made arrangements to release everything if something happens to me. The truth is going to come out one way or another. Sarah looked around the park, suddenly aware that every person in sight could be a potential threat. If Tommy's analysis was correct, then she was caught between enemy intelligence operatives and corruption within her own organization. The safe houses and communication channels she had been using might be compromised at the highest levels. "What do you propose we do?" she asked. Tommy smiled for the first time since their conversation began. "I propose we find out who killed Amy and who's been using your organization for illegal operations. And then we make sure they face justice." Sarah realized that her careful, controlled world of deep cover operations was about to become much more complicated. But for the first time in months, she felt like she might be working toward something more important than just another mission. She was working toward the truth.